you very much. I'm delighted to be here this evening, I must admit. I'm really here, actually, to celebrate the disappearance of a question mark. Now, I know this is really a very odd thing to be doing in front of you all, but as an ex-English teacher with a bit of a passion about punctuation, I have to admit, slightly geeky passion about punctuation, you don't know how important this is to be able to hold up a book here in front of you with the title Prosperity Without Growth, which I can say, Prosperity Without Growth, instead of having to say, Prosperity Without Growth? Which, of course, is what we had to do with the Sustainable Development Commission's forerunner of this wonderful book. And I'm really here this evening to celebrate the heroism of this man in the face of unbelievably intransigent, obstinate idiocy at the heart of Treasury and his government. And it will take me a very, very long time to lay this out in front of you tonight. And I
carry on,
welcome
do it.
my colleagues being here from the Treasury. I'm delighted to be here. But you need to know just how dreadful this really is. And I'm going to read you a tiny little extract which Tim thrust into my hand earlier this evening, because this poor man is still on the commission, still doing that with these Neanderthal economists. And this is a new report out from DEFRA called Review of the Economics of Sustainable Development, Interim Report. Don't worry, the final version won't be any more interesting than this one. But I just have to read you this, because you need to understand that here is DEFRA, theoretically, the principal advocate and defender of the value of sustainable development across the whole of government, still influenced by and in part run by a group of economists for whom this book is literally so subversive that it will not be allowed through the doors of DEFRA. So here we go. There were two main reasons for wanting to undertake this review. Firstly, my view, this is Richard Price, Chief Economist in DEFRA, is that the existing guidance on the application of sustainable development is long on exhortation to do things differently, but short on practical help for people trying to take or advise on policy decisions. You might ask whether DEFRA could have played any part in that, but that would be unfair. Secondly, the repeated assertion that the paraphernalia of economic analysis used in government by people like Richard Price is somehow fundamentally incompatible with sustainable development. This has become increasingly unhelpful. This criticism ranges from careful critiques of intertemporal discounting, by which we think he means Nick Stern, don't we? You've got to say nicely about Nick Stern. Say Nick. To tirades against economic growth. And that's this man. There you have it. That's the difference. Nick Stern on the one hand, and Tim Jackson on the other. And the truth of it is, the government can just about cope with Nick Stern. It absolutely can't cope with Tim Jackson. And we seriously need to reflect on why that is, why this is so problematic for all of us. And I'm really struck by this thing that is emerging in our lives at the moment, which is that at the end of 2009, as Department for Energy and Climate Change is having to face up to, at the end of 2009, fewer people are convinced about the science of climate change than at the end of 2008. We have a backwards movement here, with more people becoming persuaded by the skeptics about climate change. And there are lots of rumpled brows and decks saying, what is going on here? We've got this amazing campaign called Act on CO2. Everybody should by now be out there doing all these really serious things. I hope some of you have seen the ad currently on television, sponsored by Act on CO2, of Dad reading to his daughter, sort of story time late at night, and the book is full of very graphical images showing what happens as the world disappears under the final inundation caused by accelerated climate change. And the little girl's eyes kind of get wider and wider, especially when her teddy sinks beneath the waves. That is so ruthlessly exploitative. I cannot tell you. The Advertising Standards Authority doesn't have a go at this one. I don't know whether the problem is. So Teddy sinks beneath the waves, and she looks up at Dad and she says, does this story have a happy ending, Dad? And Dad says, that's in our hands. And then up comes act on CO2. So, of course, being a good, dutiful citizen, you would go straight to the website, and you would be told that the answer to the whole of the world being flooded was to change your light bulbs. Now, quite seriously, we're dealing here with such a massive disconnect between politicians that have learnt eloquently to advocate about the potential apocalyptic consequences of climate change, and on the other hand, simply incapable of saying anything other than high growth, low emissions. High economic growth, very low emissions, the statement of that would have. And I think in the middle of that gap, in the middle of the space between massively overhyped apocalyptic rhetoric and constantly under-ambitious policy prescriptions, I think an awful lot of people are just falling into that pit and saying, hey, if it was really the end of the world was coming, possibly I need to do a bit more than change my light bulb. I don't know if it's a true story or not. It might be apocryphal, but at the end of one workshop, in depth, one worried participant turned round to Ed Miliband, the Secretary of State, said, this has been incredibly illuminating, but look, climate change cannot possibly be for real. Because if it was, everybody would be running around in hysteria. You sort of think, got it, in one. So why is this so important? Because what the politicians cannot do is take their analysis of these issues into a broader critique of the nature of economic growth in society today. They absolutely can't. Economic growth is the security blanket without which they think governments can't function. They think if they can't pursue economic growth, they won't be able to do justice. Absolutely certain they're terribly good at doing justice even with economic growth, but that's another matter. This bunch at least like to think they're going to do justice with economic growth. The next bunch, who knows? They don't think they can do justice. They don't actually think they can take on some of these big equity issues globally. They don't think any set of progressive policy prescriptions can be made to work without economic growth. So everything else depends on being able to maintain that unquestionable faith in the primacy of economic growth. So, what Tim's done is to say that isn't really smart any longer. That just isn't going to help. We have got to get through to a much more intelligent, much more nuanced discussion about how we move towards a world where that kind of growth no longer provides the security blanket, no longer provides an excuse not to engage in some of these more intense and difficult issues. I think Tim would be the first to acknowledge that this book doesn't give all the answers, all in one fell swoop. There are some pretty nuggety issues still to address, not least around how you pay down almost unimaginable levels of debt if your economy isn't growing. How do you protect people's investments and pensions if your economy isn't growing? How do you do something really intelligent about access to and entitlements for paid work if your economy isn't growing? Those three things are such chunky, difficult policy areas that you sort of have a residual spasm of sympathy for the civil servants who would, in a more rationally ordained world, have to deal with those questions. That's why they default time after time after time to really stupid comments, like I read out from Richard Price, that this book constitutes a tirade about economic growth. We still live in such an ignorant, foolish political system that sometimes beggars belief. So thank God Tim is out there doing that stuff, and I'm just so pleased. Over to you.